This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment.
Welcome back to Weights and Wealth. We have Nick here with us through a virtual sense. We don't like to do this, but we haven't been able to all get together with Nick being in busy season right now, so you'll have a couple of these virtual episodes until mid-October when Nick can come back up to DC. Sean, would you like to get us started with today's episode?
Yeah, so for just to get the ball rolling, coming into the fall season, we have our fall challenge, which is going to be the 9/11 stair challenge. So it's 2,071 steps or 110 total stories climbed. The shout outs kind of going out to the first responders and police, firefighters, EMTs, all those people that like on 9/11 were in the two buildings, you know, saving people's lives, doing heroic things. So as far as compensation / prizes, first place, we would love to interview you. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you do. If you get first place in this challenge, we're going to bring you on to the podcast, whether it's in person or virtually, kind of like this episode, and we'll just get to know you. You know, if you have a business, great way for you to promote it, or just for fun, you know. I mean, talk with some people that you might know or might not know.
We'll find what you're interested in and what you do, and with some interviews we did in Clarksville, we wound up having some great interviews with, just people that we met. So, first place will come on the podcast.
Second place gets a free Legion supplement of their choice. And third place will pick the next book for our book club.
And to get first, second, or third, anyone that enters has the potential to win. So just send us a quick clip of you climbing the stairs or a picture, and let us know the end. Just take a picture of the Stairmaster or your
total
watch.
Time.
Yeah, so we can see your time. Whether or not you do it with extra weight on your back will give you more entries, and how fast you complete it, depending on what time bracket you come in, will also give you more entries. But even if you don't think you're going to be particularly good at this challenge, you still have a chance to win. So max
Always
participation is what we're going for here.
Always worth a shot. You want to give us the weights wisdom?
Yeah, the weights wisdom. Just one last thing with that contest. Send us your entry by September 13th.
Yes, September 13th, deadline.
All right. Weights wisdom for this week. If you have a lagging body part, make sure that the first exercise you do hits that body part. Even if, say, your calves are really lagging behind everything else, or your biceps, an exercise that normally you wouldn't put first, just put that exercise first, and you should see it stop lagging over time.
Yeah, it's because you can put more of your energy into it. You know, it's like anything, if you're doing a chest and tricep workout and your triceps are lagging, you hit them at the end, you're not going to be able to put as much effort in just because you've burned all that energy going through other exercises.
Yeah, most of your gains will come from your first exercise, and then to a lesser degree your second exercise. And then after the third or fourth exercise, you're not going to get as many gains from those muscles you hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nick, if you want to bring us into this retirement intro article, I believe it's CEO of BlackRock. What's his name?
Yeah,
Fink?
Larry
Yeah,
Fink. So he just came out and said that the retirement age, which is currently set at 65, and it's when people start getting their Social Security benefits. He just thinks that it's kind of ridiculous because people are living a lot later. I don't know what the median age is now, but like low to mid 70s, I believe.
Yeah, it just went down to 77 last time I checked.
Oh, so upper 70s.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like that's definitely contributing to, like the draining Social Security funds. And it also places a higher tax burden on the people that are working. But at the same time, I don't know. I mean, I do think that people should be able to retire for a few years before they eventually go on. So I don't know what your guys' opinion is on it.
Well, I would say like the idea that we have like a government centered retirement age is kind of silly, because really it should be based on like your family situation, and if you can just do that rather than relying on the government to take care of you, you'd be a lot better off. And I mean, I just plugged this into a quick like compound interest calculator, but if you took $7,000 and just plugged it in a S&P mirror fund like SPY, in 65 years without adding a single cent, you're going to have $61 million, which is more than enough to retire on. So like,
wait, what is that?
Yeah, so right,
61.
Yeah, so $7,000 with $0 monthly contribution, 65 years, an estimated interest rate of 15.
That's high.
No,
change that
with
to 8.
with a variance rate of 8.
Change the 15 to 8 and see what
15
happens.
to 8. You think 5% variance?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. You'll have $1 million.
Yeah.
It's still pretty good.
So if the return you get is 8% and all you do is put in $7,000 at birth, you wind up with over $1 million if you never continue to add that again.
Yeah.
And the amount that taxes put into Social Security for each person is a lot more than $7,000. So switching from the Ponzi scheme that is Social Security to a system like this, where you just get $7,000 put into a retirement account at birth, would be a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, like there would definitely be a way to do it with some sort of like, if you still wanted, like, if you're a politician or a bureaucrat and you still wanted the government to have like, an involvement, just give like when that person's Social Security number is created, you just give that family a tax credit for that, and that money would go into, rather than them paying that $7,000 in taxes that year, that just goes into, a 2100 retirement cycle for that person, and then you just leave it alone.
Nick and I talked about this in one of the first episodes, I think, all the way back. When did we start the podcast, Nick? Early 2022? Or was it 2023? I guess, let's see, it was 2023. So in one of the first episodes a couple of years ago, Nick and I talked about this, and this has really gained steam. The All In podcast, which is a pretty big podcast, they talked about this exact thing with like the $7,000 initial investment a few months ago, and it's really picked up steam since then. But you heard it here first on Weights and Well.
Yeah, leading the charge in Social Security reform. Us close to the hub of government embezzlement. I mean, because that's the issue, is like they're just talking about, like, they're like, oh wow, we don't have enough people paying in. Well, it's kind of more a societal issue rather than an economic issue, because people stopped having kids, they're having kids later.
They're living longer than when Social Security was created.
Yeah. And I mean...
Yeah, and then also, like, the money that was originally put into Social Security was just, like, given out to people who were of, like, the retirement age at that time. So it's not like you put your money in and then it, like, grew on its own. It was more just, like, a distribution.
Yes.
So contribution.
It's redistribution.
It's Ponzi scheme and wealth redistribution. Is what Social Security is.
You're not. It's the youth paying for the elderly, when it really should be. Yes, it might take more oversight, but with today's modern software and our ability to individualize so many things, it really would not be, I think, a huge ask to just have my Social Security number is tied to this specific chunk of money, and boom, like that there's your retirement. That's like $1 million yeah, you're probably going to be screwed in 65 years. Probably going to be worth like $100,000 at the rate that inflation's going. But it's still a better system than Social Security, because what's like the monthly Social Security?
I think it actually differs based off how much you put in and how much money. How much money.
I think it's usually like around 30 something thousand from what I see on people's like Social Security statements. It's usually like mid to upper 30s. But you're also putting a ton in. I mean, like the total Social Security tax is like, I think it's 15.3% between the employee and employer. So, if you're making $100,000, that's like 15 grand a year that you could just be putting in like your own savings.
Yeah.
And Sean mentioned just that $7,000 over the course of 65 years grew to like $1 million. So if you had an extra 15 grand every year to put away,
let's say we just do the $7,000, and then it's let's say $5,000 a year, right?
That's monthly.
Oh yeah, $5,000 monthly. Let's say
or do
$500 a month.
Do 100 a month, because that's more conservative. Like what?
I feel like most people could spare $100 a month, unless you're like totally.
So if you start with 7,000 at birth, and then you put in 100 a year, that gets you to over $3 million.
1,200 a year. 1,200 a year on top of the initial $7,000 tax credit will give you
6 million.
Yeah, $3.26 million. And I feel like if median retirement age is, 65, and you're going to live another decade on average, I guess with the average death, roughly 77, so 12 years, I feel like you can be pretty comfortable with $3.2 million, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely going to give you more money than 30 grand a year.
Nick, do you have anything to add from the intro article?
No, I don't. I mean, it was pretty straight to the point, just that he says that people should start working later just because like they're living later.
Yeah. So the age that everyone thinks of, 65, Larry Fink is saying should not be the age that people are retiring. If they can keep working and they're healthy, they should work a little bit longer.
I don't know. I always find it depressing when, like, especially you go to like Walmart or something, and the bagger is like obviously past the age of retirement. I find that really depressing. I feel like you should be sitting on the front porch and just like, I don't know, whittling or something.
Well, I guess it just depends how you set yourself up for the future then. So have you been investing over the course of your life? This is something we talk about all the time, is just continuing to buy low-cost index funds and just letting that egg grow for yourself over the course of your lifetime.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's like some people could also do it for like a retirement job. Mm-hmm. If they want something to do throughout the day, work like 20 hours a week or something.
Yeah.
But
all right, let's move on then. Peptides are a huge rage right now within the fitness industry. It's almost impossible to listen to a podcast without hearing ads for peptides and hearing the hosts talk about why peptides are so great and why everyone should start using them. It's always important to be somewhat skeptical of anything new. I think the data shows this with people that were skeptical of the COVID vaccine. I think the data kind of backs up that they may have been right to be skeptical. The difference between the mRNA vaccine and peptides is pretty big. A lot of people don't know what peptides are, so let's just start there at a very basic high school biology level. Peptides are essentially proteins. They're chains of amino acids. They signal your body and your cells to perform certain functions. So a lot of people understand basically how DNA works. You got the 4 different molecules, and depending on the order that they're in, they basically write out a code. Proteins are the same way in your body. There's a series of amino acids, and the series of that amino acids creates the shape of the protein that is created, and this is how peptides work. They instruct your cells to do certain things. The way that peptides are currently being advertised is take this peptide, it will do this one thing and it will be great for you. If you've heard of Ozempic or semaglutides, those are peptides. The issue that I think people are starting to see is that there's nothing in your body where only one specific thing happens in a vacuum and nothing else happens. So if you're taking Ozempic, sometimes there's side effects of stomach paralysis or other issues. It's not extremely common, but anytime that something is happening in your body, it's usually not just one thing that happens. There's usually other things that happen to counteract that and keep you at balance, at homeostasis. So
It's a full system.
yeah, so I would be a little bit skeptical. At least I'm personally more skeptical than it seems a lot of the fitness industry is on peptides only performing one certain function and there being an impossibility of any drawbacks.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to just cut your appetite, just start smoking, because
Terrible
that's
advice.
like the tried and true appetite suppressant.
Don't do
that
that.
and black coffee. That's why the French are so skinny. Yeah, bad advice. Don't listen to me. All right. So moving on to just some of our like wealth talk here.
I guess have we mentioned what today's episode is on?
Not necessarily. This is a mystery episode, so you have to listen to find out. No. So we're going to basically be talking about shoulders and like how to target that muscle group effectively, and then decreasing your taxes using basis. So Nick, if you want to bring us in on the the tax and
Tax
wealth.
man.
On the basis.
Yes.
Yeah, I gotcha. So the IRS's definition of basis isn't super clear to me. It's just basis is generally the amount of your capital investment in property for tax purposes. But the way that I like to think about it is it's your after tax dollars that are at risk. So like the classic example is buying a stock. You know, if you buy a stock for $100, you had already earned that $100 at one point, paid tax on it, and now it's invested. So if that stock goes up to $110 and then you sell it, you get to net the $100 against the $110 that you made. So you only pay tax on 10% because you had $100 of basis. Another example would be a home. You know, if you buy a home for $500,000 and then you sell it later for $700,000, your gain would be $200,000 in that situation. And then that's not accounting for like the home sale exclusion, because taxpayers can don't have to pay tax on up to $250,000 in gain on a primary home if you're single. But then something that can also increase your house basis is if you put additions onto it. So say you buy that home for $500,000, but then you add, you know, like a garage or something like that, and that costs you $50,000. You had paid tax on that $50,000 that you then put into your home. So now your basis in your home is $550,000. And basis is, you know, it's used to offset the selling price when you eventually sell an asset.
Essentially what you're saying is that, you know, in layman's terms, as someone who did not study any of this, is that if you have that house and you bought it for $500, you sell it for $700, you're only paying tax on the $200,000 profit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
how can people use this new knowledge they've just obtained from Nick the Tax Man to benefit themselves when they're doing tax returns or when they're strategically planning buying stocks and homes and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, as far as stocks, like your brokerage keeps track of the stock basis for you. So there's not really much you can do there. With your home, it's important to, you know, track any capital improvements, especially with how much homes have been going up. You know, a lot of people aren't within that full exclusion and then do have to end up paying tax on some of the gains. But if you track like major improvements that you make to your home, that can help offset those gains. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's not really too much that you can do with basis to use it to your advantage. It's just more something just to be aware of when you are doing your taxes.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about these limited liability corporations and then S corporation, difference between that and like a C corp?
Yeah, so this is going to get a little bit more complicated, so it's a little harder to talk about it in layman's terms. But like a C corporation, income is taxed at that entity level. So they pay all of the tax on their income. I think the corporate rate's like 21% right now. So if you're a shareholder in a C corporation, you don't pay any taxes when they make money. You only pay taxes when they issue dividends. So if you get a dividend from a C corporation, then you do have to pay tax on it. But the difference between the C corp and then the S corporations and partnerships is that S corps and partnerships are flow through entities. So any income for either of those made during the year flows directly to the person owning it. So say, for example, Weights and Wealth makes $300,000 one year. The like Ted, Sean, and I would all pay tax on that $100,000 in that year, rather than Weights and Wealth paying the tax on it. And then when that comes, and then how that would affect your basis is we would get an increase in basis for our ownership in Weights and Wealth for that $100,000 because it flowed through to us, and then we paid tax on it. So say we had all originally put in $100,000 into Weights and Wealth to start it, and then we were later taxed on our $100,000 income. Our basis in Weights and Wealth is now $200,000 because we had the original $100,000 that we earned, paid tax on, put it in, and then Weights and Wealth made $100,000 for each of us, and then we all paid tax on it. Now we never got that $100,000; it stayed in Weights and Wealth, but our basis in Weights and Wealth will go up because we paid the tax on it. Is that clear?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Does this affect like sole proprietorships? If we have people that are the only employee in their small business that they run, does basis affect them as well?
So yes, it does. So for when you eventually go to sell it, if like you are going to sell it, income that you have made in the past from that could be used to offset it, as long as you didn't actually like take it out of the sole prop, because the distribution will decrease your basis in your business. Is that what you were asking?
I don't know.
So,
All right, so let's use an example for this.
so like, let's say you're a trucker, right? And you bought your own rig for $100,000, right? Your own 18-wheeler. And then you work in that industry for 10 years and you're like, okay, this is not for me. And you pass off and you sell your network and the truck. Like, is that $100,000 that you spent buying the truck? And then let's say like your network now is worth, like your route deliveries, for example, are worth, $150,000 on top of the truck, which has probably been depreciated. So let's say it's worth $50,000 now because it's a decade old. So your total value is $200,000, but your basis would be $100,000.
So it depends how much depreciation you took for tax purposes, because you depreciate, a vehicle generally over 5 years. 18-wheelers might be different. But you generally would have taken that as an expense over the years.
Okay.
And then your basis in that would essentially be zero because you got the tax benefit for it. So you probably wouldn't have any basis in that and would have to pay tax on the full amount.
Okay. So typically then, when people sell their small businesses, they're typically paying taxes on the entire sale?
I mean, it varies from industry to industry
Okay.
a lot, but basically anything above your basis, yes, you would have to pay tax on.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
That must make exits very tough. We do have a listener that works with small businesses on exits and selling those businesses that we do hope to have come on either late this fall or early next year. That'll be a good conversation with him.
Yeah, definitely learn a lot from that.
Nick, any last bits before we move on to training shoulders?
No, that is everything I have on basis. I hope that it was clear to listeners. I mean, it's kind of tough to explain, but if anybody has questions on it, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, hit us up on the Instagram or any other social media. Definitely monitor the Instagram most. So we are more than happy to field any questions. Nick's in busy season right now, but I'm sure I can get him to type up a quick paragraph if anybody has any questions.
All right. Training shoulders. I want Nick to start this one off and just tell us how he grew his shoulders so massively, because when I met him first day of freshman year, I was like, holy crap, this guy's got cannonballs on his shoulders. Nick was a really good wrestler in high school, so do you attribute it mostly to that, or were you doing a lot of like shoulder pressing and stuff in high school as well?
No, I mean, I think it was because pretty much as soon as I started lifting, I was hitting shoulders from like day one, whereas I know like a lot of people don't do that. Like me and all my friends, like we had a day just for shoulders as soon as we started lifting. So I was doing shoulder presses and lateral raises and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Starting when I started at like 16 or so.
Yeah,
as far as my traps go, though, that was probably wrestling.
Yeah, I feel like from the beginning, from the outset when I started lifting, I did not do that, and maybe that's why I had really tiny shoulders and they were big lagging muscle group. But then like junior year of college, I started to really focus on my shoulders and making sure like, oh, today's a push day or an upper body day. I'm starting with overhead press, and that's when my shoulders started to get a lot bigger.
Yeah, I mean, overhead press is definitely like one of my weakest lifts. Like I can row like 250 on a straight bar, but probably cannot do that on an overhead press. Like it's
250 would be a crazy overhead press.
I know. We're getting there.
I think Nick's got the biggest overhead press. What is it, Nick? What was your peak?
Most I've hit is 2 plates.
Yeah, I haven't even attempted that. I can get a couple reps at like 195, but I don't know. I always feel like my spine is just gonna snap. So yeah, I'm always a little apprehensive whenever I'm like really throwing up the weight on overhead press.
So this leads into
what's that?
This leads into a good point there. When you're overhead pressing, if you're doing the like exorcist, like your back's just completely in full on extension, what you can do is you can put Z presses in there. We'll link a video of the Z press if you're watching. You can watch if you're on Spotify or on YouTube. But what the Z press is essentially you're sitting down, your legs are extended out in front of you, and then you're keeping your lower back really straight and your thoracic, your like mid upper back pretty straight as well while you're overhead pressing. And what that does is it forces you to not be in such severe extension, because if you were to try to do that, you would fall over. So the Z press is really good for anyone that's trying to overhead press but finds themselves in that fully extended position every time they overhead press, even if it's a very sub-maximal weight.
Yeah, mine's not like that bad, but it's still just, it feels risky, you know?
It feels risky.
Like I don't know. You see those guys like overhead squatting 315, and I don't know. That it's impressive. It's impressive. I don't think I'm ever gonna attempt that, but it's definitely. I feel like so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but shoulders have a very high recovery rate. You know, like you can train them a lot, and they generally regenerate very quickly. speaking out my ass here? Or?
No, I mean more so than like your pec, I would say.
Yeah. So like, I feel like you can generally get a lot of good volume work in, but for some reason, and like I had an old shoulder injury, like my labrum, but it's definitely something that's I think everybody could work on.
When we talk about training the shoulder, there's basically 3 major parts, and people will get really into the weeds of, oh no, there's actually 7, but for the average person, it helps to just go through the 3 main parts of the shoulder. So there's the anterior section, which is going to be the front, and that's going to connect all the way to your clavicle, your collarbone, and that's going to be classic example of people trying to train their anterior delt is going to be either an overhead press or some sort of press, or like the plate raises out front, or a dumbbell raise out in front of your body. And then you've also got the medial portion of the delt, the middle portion, more around the side of the shoulder. Most people are going to hit that with different lateral raise variations. And then you've got the posterior section, which runs around the back and connects around the shoulder blade. So I think the hardest for most people to train is probably the posterior section of the shoulder. It's probably the most forgotten because everyone loves benching and loves to hit the front of the shoulder all the time, but a lot of times we neglect the rear portion of the shoulder. So.
I don't know if it's the hardest, but it's definitely the most forgotten. I would say probably most people struggle to do like dips, like properly. Like if we're talking about like technical difficulty, it would probably be like either overhead press or dips. But it's like, cause I mean, anybody can get in a rear pec deck and you just whack them out. You know, it's like it's stupid easy. But it's the dips, like getting the right depth. I think Elevate PT they just posted something on dips, which is like that kind of clicked for me. Just talking about like full range of motion on dips and like how most people aren't getting everything out of it that they can, and you know, I think that just kind of like doubles down on the point that like there's a lot of exercises out there that seem very simple and technical, and it's like, oh, you're just gonna take this here and you push it up, but no, it's like overhead press. Like if you want to get better at it and do it without, you know, like fusing your lower back together. Like it takes a lot, you know. It's a very technical movement, just like back squat. You know, like you'd think it would be super simple, but no, there's a lot of like points of performance that you have to hit to do it safely and effectively.
And that's one of the reasons I mentioned the Z press, and I bring a lot of my clients through the Z press before overhead pressing, is because it's essentially a regression of that movement where we're more or less limiting the press to the shoulder joint and not allowing the movement of the back to really take over that motion. Another thing that Sean mentioned with the dips, I think it helps for a lot of people with dips if you think of the dips as actually a lower trap exercise. And if you think about getting those shoulder blades down and using the lower traps to pull the shoulder blades down, you'll be able to do a lot better on your dips, and your shoulders won't roll forward as much. A lot of people struggle with dips because their shoulders are like this when they're trying to dip, which is going to make it very hard to get much range of motion out of them. Let's, I guess, talk about some of our favorite exercises for dips. We've hammered overhead press. We talked about dips. One of my other favorite exercises for shoulders that really helped me blow my shoulders up, especially on the sides, was farmer carries. One thing that people don't know a lot about training your shoulders is the deltoid, that big shoulder muscle. It activates a lot more when your fist is clenched. So you'll see people training their shoulders and they're putting sometimes their wrists in the wrist cuffs and doing lateral raises that way. But your deltoids receive a lot more activation when your hands are actually like carrying something. So if you do a farmer's walk with a trap bar and your hands are out to the side a little bit, or a hex bar, to me that hits my medial delts, the outside portion or the middle portion, almost like nothing else.
I've recently got into doing like single arm dumbbell overhead, because I feel like the stability work you get from that, especially on like the sides of your core and stuff like that has been very beneficial for me, like trying to build up strength in the overhead press movement. I just take like 50, 60, 70 pound dumbbell, whatever it is, and I treat it like any type of strength movement where I kind of just like do like a single arm clean up and then do like 5 to 8 reps per side. And I felt like my stability in my core gets absolutely worked doing that, and I'm just kind of like hitting each side of my overhead press movement in isolation, which I think in some ways for building strength on like, you know, the big 5, like isolateral movements can really help you break through barriers. You know, like if you want to get a bigger squat, you need to do Bulgarians because you can train each leg individually, and that way you're more effective when you have both your legs together.
Yeah, I know Ted got me doing something like that for a little while, where I would take like a kettlebell and just try to hold it like straight up and down. Now, granted, I could only really do like 25 or 30 pounds because it takes a lot of balance. But from a stability standpoint, I feel like that helped my shoulders a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talking about stability. So you've got mobility, which is the ability to actively, not passively. Passively would be more flexibility, but mobility is actively going through the range of motion of a joint. So you can do different mobility exercises. A lot of like the body weight mobility exercises that you think about, you got to try to tense up different muscles while you're doing those mobility exercises. And then when we talk more about stability, it's the ability to express strength through the function of that joint. So what Nick was talking about was the bottoms up kettlebell press, where you're holding a kettlebell by the handle, and then the bottom of the kettlebell is up top, and you're holding that out in front of you, and you're working the rotator cuff muscles. You're working the function of the rotator cuff muscles as they manipulate your shoulder blade out in front of you, and you're using a really light weight because it's really hard to balance, and then you're pushing it up. A lot of people, when they're doing isolation rotator cuff exercise work for rehab, all their training is the action of those rotator cuff muscles. Think of like the classic example of the external rotation with a band or a dumbbell. They're just trying to shorten and lengthen that individual rotator cuff muscle, whether it's the supraspinatus or the teres minor or the infraspinatus. They're just trying to isolate one rotator cuff muscle as its action. Action, think bicep, flexing, getting that elbow up and shortening the angle of the elbow. That's the action of a muscle. Whereas the function of the muscle is how that muscle works with other muscles to manipulate a joint, essentially. So the bottoms up kettlebell press is going to use all those rotator cuff muscles to express the function of the joint and press up. And that's going to go a lot longer ways in your rehab and recovery for your rotator cuff than just doing some external rotation.
Would you say that most like recovery therapy like sessions, like they don't actually get down to that recovery? They kind of focus on just making sure it functions and not actually getting you better?
Yeah, from what I've seen, when you go to physical therapy, a lot of times they'll give you a really light band and you're just doing the action of a muscle. This is going to be important in the early stages as you're recovering from some sort of tear or something. But once you get past that, if you want to get back to performing in the gym, again, not medical advice, I'm not a physical therapist, but this will be a good conversation for when we have Dr. Kev on. Sean mentioned Elevate earlier, Elevate PT. A lot of times when you go to a physical therapist, they're not helping you get back to the gym. They're not doing that bottoms up kettlebell press or other movements with you where you're actually expressing the strength and function of that muscle group and that joint. So from what I've seen, I mean, you can take my example with my recovery with my low back in the Army. The Army PTs had me just doing, this was like months up to a year after my stress fractures in my hips and my 3 disc herniations from Ranger, they had me just doing like trunk torso extensions, just lying down and then like flexing my erectors to make my trunk come up. How's that going to help me get back to rucking and deadlifting? Like, but then I go talk to Dr. Kevin and I say like, here's what I'm looking to do for my rehab program based off my knowledge. And he's like, yeah, that's a good start. We need to work on the lats and the glutes for the low back. We need to work on your core strength. So we started putting in these exercises. We went into the deadlift and started with a trap bar. I'd already started with the trap bar when I went to him, but then he got me down to like a snatch grip deadlift, an elevated deadlift. Really light at first, but I have to gain confidence in that range of motion again. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, with your question, I think a lot of times physical therapy is like a good starting place, but it doesn't get you back to where you need to be if you're someone that wants to keep training or just accept the demands that life puts on you.
Yeah. Just like make you an actual functional human being so that you're not some, I don't know, glass princess that is terrified of walking out the door and living life as a man or woman should. You know, that you should be able to go do things at all times and not be, 30 years old and be like, oh, well, I had a back injury when I was in high school, and so now I will no longer function as a normal human being the rest of my life. That's not the right answer. The human body is very resilient, and there are ways around your issues, and there's ways to overcome it. And, you can do both at the same time. You can work on alternatives, like I think I've mentioned this before, but I had I'm pretty sure it was like a ghost fracture or some type of stress fracture in my foot, but I couldn't squat. So I figured out different ways to do legs and did that, and eventually it got better, and now I can, do everything. Yeah. Or, like Ted's situation where you have to just work through it. And, maybe you're in a situation where you can do both, and you have an injury that you are focusing a certain amount of your rehab on and recovery on, but you still want to, be getting after it. So you're hitting muscle groups that aren't directly affected by that, and you can train those independently of your injury and still make progress and still get healthier and still get stronger. Yeah, what Sean's saying there, if you take a Prescript course, it's one of the continuing education companies I go through, like the first day, Dr. Shala says, we're going to learn how to out-function bad structure. So we're humans, things break, things tear. You need to be able to out-function. We already went through the function of muscles. You need to strengthen the muscles around that damaged structure to be able to keep performing and get back to not just high levels of performance, but moderate levels of performance, really. Yeah. Do we want to hit, I guess, rear delts real quick? Sean mentioned the reverse pec deck machine. That's not my favorite. I don't know. I prefer like a leaned over reverse dumbbell fly to the pec deck machine personally. I don't know, Nick, you do much for your rear delts, or you just let them be massive?
I mean, I do those. It's like a reverse fly. Like I'll take cables and start with them, and like my arms are out in front of me, and then just pull them backwards until I'm like a T kind of. Yep. And then but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. It's a simple muscle to train. You just have to figure out, start with nice low weight and figure out where you can feel it, get that good contraction, and then you're set.
Yeah, and for most people, it is going to be a smaller muscle that's going to be hit with a lot of different back movements. So if you're doing different row variations with your elbows at different angles, for a lot of muscles, just at a very basic level, when you're training, whether it's hitting different portions or different heads of the tricep, or hitting different muscles in the back, changing the angle of your elbows on different rows or different tricep variations or anything, that elbow angle is going to help determine a lot of times which muscles are getting hit more than others. So as long as you're mixing up the angle of the elbow during your different rowing movements on your back day or your pull day or upper body day, you should be hitting those rear delts a decent amount.
Great. I think that's pretty much all we have on these two subjects. So thanks for listening in. Again, if you guys have questions, don't be afraid to reach out to us and contact
Lastly,
us.
one thing I'd add with the shoulders, if shoulders are a lagging muscle group for you, put it first in your workout, just like the weights wisdom that we started with.
Every time. If you're weak on it, do it first.
Yeah, and then we'll just mention one more time, the fall fitness challenge is going to be the stairs. So the 9/11 stair challenge.
2,071 stairs or 110 stories.
Yeah,
Time.
2,071 stairs or 110 stories on the Stairmaster or in a football stadium is what Sean and I used to do. Just do that. Let us know. You'll get extra entries for using weight or for getting in a higher time bracket.
One extra entry per 5 pounds of additional weight.
Or for tagging people on the posts or sharing the post with the Fall Fitness Challenge, you'll gain extra entries as well.
Share with your friends. Looking forward to hearing from you guys.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth. And don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.